We're going to discuss how your brain processes, how it recognizes, and how it deals with negative emotions and what it does to you. Now, some of you folks have been in these topics for a long time. Some folks are pretty new here. The thing I encourage you to do every day, is to listen like it's the first time. Right? One of the behaviors we have that actually slows down our ability to learn, actually creates anxiety and erodes our self-confidence, is that we start to hear something and we say, oh, I know it. I'm going to stop listening to it. I've heard that before. I know what you're going to say. I agree. I disagree. All those things. So catch yourself. This is one of those times where you get to say, oh, I may have heard of this topic before. If you have TikTok, YouTube, any of these things, you listen to these great, fantastic speakers like Mel Robbins, Jordan Peterson, Joe Dispenza, all those fantastic people. What you're going to notice is they're talking about similar subjects in their own way. They're not copying each other. They're talking about how your brain works. They're delivering it in your own way. So how you doing, Jeffrey? Good to see you. All right, so it's 6 o'clock. Let me get going. Okay, as most of you know, and some of you don't, my name is Coach Mac. I run Team Eagle One, the Navy SEAL candidate, and SWCC and Special Ops Preparatory Training Program. I also teach the Absolute Responsibility Leadership Biomechanics course, something I created myself over the years. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why I created it, why it came about. So some years ago, I was on active duty. I was in the Navy, I was in the SEAL teams, and I started to notice some people got injured, some people didn't. And I don't mean traumatic injuries, getting blown up or shot or things like that. That's everyone's going to get injured. I mean, I noticed that some people were getting lifestyle injuries just in the lifestyle of training, and some people weren't. So I started to take a look at it, and I noticed it, and I started to study it and research it. If you know much about me, you know in my earlier years, I was skinny as a rail, right? I always say I could actually see my heartbeat because I was so skinny. I could look down and watch my heartbeat in my chest. That's no joke, it's true. So when I got in the Navy, I started to learn about exercise, started learning about working out. I wanted to know what worked and what didn't work. So then I applied to BUD/S training, went into the SEAL team, made it into the SEAL teams, and I started to notice some people got injured and some people didn't. If there's a few strengths that we all have, I always say we all have some superpowers. One of mine would be noticing patterns and getting super curious about how we're going to attack those patterns, solve those problems. So I started to notice some people got injured and some people didn't. And I started to watch what they were doing for training. More importantly, I started to notice what their understanding of biomechanics were, and then what they did for training. So little by little, I started to develop and research and study that and try to eliminate injuries, minimize and eliminate injuries in those active duty SEALs. And I got out of the Navy and started to study it more. About 15 years ago, I was in an airport and I was looking through the airport bookstore. You know, they have all those amazing leadership books. And I mean, they're amazing. Every answer, all the way back to Plato's allegory of the cave, every answer you ever wanted to know about being an amazing human and a fantastic leader is in those books. Every one of them. People more educated than I'll ever be. Just an average military guy, more educated than I'll ever be. Great writers. And I would read those books and think, why doesn't this work? Why doesn't this work? Why is not every corporation amazing? Why is not every single person not riddled with anxiety or depression or lacking self-confidence? Why are we not constantly able to build self-confidence, minimize anxiety? Why are we not even able to understand each other very well? Don't even understand each other very well. Perception. So that's what I went to work on. And I fell into the study and the science of neuroscience. It's always been around. We just haven't used the term so much. You'll call it a lot of different things. So I started to notice the patterns there. This entire series is a culmination of all of those years, 36 years now of research and development and looking at why is all this incredible education? Why are all these fantastic speakers and educators and researchers? Why do we still have the same issues? Why are we still running into the same problems? So without spending too much time there, I wrote up here on the board, the human brain. And if there's one concept I would really like you to understand, I'd really like you to get your head around, right? Is that the human brain is hardwired to be average or just below average. Meaning when we're born, your brain comes into this world and it is set up to say, if nothing else happens, I'm going to really do my best to make sure that you're average or just below average. When that is understood, it really opened up my world when I kind of came up with that phrase and said, wow, we are so set up to be average. We've heard many neuroscience researchers tell us the human brain is wired to be negative. Well, I'm telling you the effect of being negative, the effect of being anxious, the effect of all these things, it's to drive your brain down toward being average. And today we're going to discuss why. I'm going to spell it out very simply. Some of you have seen it before. Some of you haven't. We have some new folks in here who hadn't seen this part of it before. So the human brain is hardwired to be average or just below average. When that makes sense, you are free. You are free to start getting curious and saying, where am I average? What can I do? Now, back to all those books and those amazing leadership people and all that stuff, all that great stuff, that great education. I was reading it thinking, why is it not working? Well, I started to research how your brain actually learns, what your brain actually needs to learn and understand things. About 19 years ago, I was in a class at Santa Monica College, in Santa Monica, California. And one of the professors gave me four words that this professor called the pathway of negative emotions. I'm going to use those four words over here, and I'll describe these boards in a minute. I'm going to use those four words, and I'm going to tell you how they apply to your entire life. It's your limbic system. It's your fight, flight, or freeze system. We activate that system, hundreds to thousands. There's all sorts of different numbers, but let's just say a lot. Your limbic system is activated thousands of times a day. It is always going to be activated thousands of times a day. We're not going to stop the activation. We might minimize it. We might lower the intensity, and we might learn to do other things that actually make us less anxious, more intelligent, all these things. So that's what we're going to talk about. Those four words that professor called, nice and simple, the pathway of negative emotions. So I love this, and I wrote it down at the time, the pathway of negative emotions. This is your limbic system. For those of you who are here for the first time, we have two boards on the wall. We have a left board and a right board. Don't worry, it's not political. We have a left board and a right board. The left board is indicating your limbic system, and the right board is indicating your prefrontal cortex. You'll notice that the right board is much larger than the left board because all of your options and opportunity is on the right board. Your limbic system is nice and tight, it's super powerful, and it is hardwired to rule your life unless you train it otherwise. So for anyone who's experienced anxiety, anger, depression, anything, it's here, it's on the left board, it's your limbic system. And there's no one who hasn't experienced being anxious, feeling fear, being irritable, being burned out or bummed out. Remember, depression for our purposes, you might just be exhausted from your day. Your positive chemistry is depressed. It cannot get elevated, right? So the pathway of negative emotions has four components. Has 1, 2, 3, 4. Has four components. I'm going to switch colors because this marker is losing its life. The pathway of negative emotions has four components. Every time we have a negative feeling or experience, every single time, we are traveling down this board. We are over in our limbic system. Our fight, flight, or freeze system activates because it says, hey, I don't know what's about to happen, but if it gets really bad, I want to be ready. If it gets really bad, I want to be ready. That's why we react to small things, sometimes in a similar way that we act to larger things initially, because your limbic system says, I don't know what's occurring right now. I'm a little uncertain. So I'm going to get ready in case we have to fight, in case we have to flee, or in case freezing and shutting up and getting small is the way we go. So it's fight, flight, or freeze. So the first thing that has to happen for us to have a negative emotion, the first aspect of a negative emotion is control. Control. Nice and simple. Control. Control. You might hear this a lot. You might hear people say, oh, I want to be more in control. Well, that's not going to happen. We never are, right? I want to be more in control. It is more correct to actually say, I felt out of control. And that's when you know, when you feel out of control, when you start to feel anxious or irritated or afraid, that's your limbic system firing. That's your fight, flight, or freeze system saying, hey, I better get ready. It could get really bad right now, and I don't know why. Get really bad, and I don't know why. So control. And what's the second one? We start to feel out of control. You've heard me, sorry, I've been talking a lot today, grammatically tough moment. You've heard me say this before. We might be driving down the road together. A car starts to swerve into your lane. And immediately we start to get tunnel vision and tunnel hearing. We start to focus on that car because your limbic system is saying, hey, we have to get ready. Something might happen that is so bad we could die, right? So we get control. And what's the next thing we feel? We feel fear. Feel fear. So we have control. I'm driving along in the car. I'm having a great day. It's fabulous. It's fantastic. All of a sudden, I see a car start to swerve into my lane. It might not be swerving into my lane. It might only be getting closer to me, but it's a 2,000-pound vehicle or more. We're moving down the road. Suddenly my country music doesn't sound so enjoyable anymore. And I focus, I start to be afraid. Another word for afraid is anxiety, right? So a lot of people, you might find people have a hard time saying, I wasn't afraid, I was anxious. That's the same thing chemically. Same thing chemically. So what happens next? So we're driving down the road. The car starts to move into our lane. We start to feel afraid or anxious, and we get a little stiff. We start watching it. We get tunnel vision, tunnel hearing, right? The music starts to be annoying. The passenger in the car starts to be annoying. You know, we're saving our lives right now from this car starting to move over. That's what we're doing. We're saving our lives. Your brain is ready. It's in its life-saving mode. So we turn around and something's going to happen right here. But one of the things that commonly happens if we're continuing down the pathway of negative emotions is one of my favorites, anger. So I first feel out of control. My limbic system lights up and says, hey, buddy, you might be in danger. Let's get a little anxious. If I continue to stay in this place, if I continue to travel utilizing my limbic system, my hardwired system, the strongest system I possess in my brain, that for cognitive function, I experience anger. So control, fear, anger. After anger, I'm all pumped up. I'm frustrated. The car almost hit me. I swerved my car out of the way. I got angry or I got frustrated. And all of a sudden I went, whew, depression. My chemistry depresses. All of my chemistry. My angry chemistry, my positive chemistry, already depressed. I lost sight of it way back when. So I have depression. Depression. So the pathway of negative emotions, very simply, these 4 words changed my whole life. It changed my ability to do research. There's several things we're going to talk about in the next few weeks. All of the topics there really changed my life. It changed my ability to function, understand myself, and make good decisions. Now, today, when I announced this at the beginning of this series, I said, developing the culture of you. The first part of developing a culture is to know what your culture is to be aware of what your culture is. People always say mindfulness or self-awareness. Well, it doesn't mean anything to most people unless somebody tells you, focus on this. What is it? Focus on that. What is it, right? So the pathway of negative emotions, very simply, is control, fear, anger, depression. Control, fear, anger, depression. This is your fight, freeze, response system. Fight, flight, or freeze. Who can tell me what's the most common in nature? What is the most common of the 3? What is the most common of the 3? Someone who hasn't sat in this course before, any of the new folks, what is the most common of the 3 in nature, in the animal kingdom? Anyone have a guess? Jay Brooks, what do you think? Oh, you were coming on.
Is it freeze?
It is freeze. Fantastic. Yeah, it's actually freeze. So fight, flight, or freeze. Freeze is actually a wonderful response unless you're getting hit by a bus, right? But it's a wonderful response when you feel control, fear in many, many situations, and we'll talk about that in the upcoming weeks. But freeze is actually the most common response in nature. And you'll know it as we kind of turtle. You'll hear a loud noise and people duck and drop down. That is your freeze system activating. So we actually use freeze many, many times. Someone will say something loud and aggressive and we'll look and freeze. We'll look and freeze. Super common right there. So when I first started discussing this a few years ago, people would talk about freeze as if they never did it. Well, freeze happens for us all the time. It's actually a wonderful strategy at times. It can also increase the hostility coming your way. So control, fear, anger, depression. Now, the pathway of negative emotions, I've taken those 4 words and evolved this into this series over the last 15 years. So everything after this is just things we've evolved from working with people, training Navy SEALs, working with future therapists, training first responders, executives. It's all the same because they all have a brain, just that their chemistry is working in different ratios from each other, right? So our life experiences, our genetics, our DNA, our brain is functioning with the same chemistry in different ratios. That's how we're unique. A bunch of the same chemistry, but different ratios. There's 3 things this does. And if one of the most important additions I've put in any of this series in the last 15 years is these 3 words, or these 3 phrases. Your limbic system is accomplishing 3 things for you. 3 things. It doesn't matter whether you're arguing with a significant other, whether you're trying to not get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, or whether you're getting out of the way of the bus who's going to run you over. It doesn't matter. It's going to accomplish these 3 things for you. It's trying to stop the input. So the first thing it's trying to do, your limbic system is saying, hey, I need to stop the input. So you're going to notice your brain gets very, very low on intellect when we're in fight, flight, or freeze. So when we talk about the culture of you and you being a better leader and more positive, all of these things, every time we fire this, it's trying to stop the input. What does that mean? It means la, 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 la. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Your brain actually loses its ability to perceive clearly. It loses its ability to hear things well or to understand. So you get tunnel vision, tunnel hearing, and you get tunnel thinking, meaning I lose up to 30 IQ points when I'm in fight, flight, or freeze. Now, for some of you, you might be sitting there saying, oh, wow, I'm in fight, flight, or freeze a lot. Does that mean I lose up to 30 IQ points every time I do it? Yes, it does. It does. Was that a question? Okay, I guess it wasn't. Okay, so you lose up to 30 IQ points whenever we go into fight, flight, or freeze. So the first thing your brain does, your limbic system does, all this prefrontal cortex, this is where your confidence is. This is where your sense of achievement is. This is where your empathy, understanding, this is where your highest IQ, available IQ is. It all gets the resources sucked out of it. They move to the left board and it tries to stop the input. That's what it did. It stopped the functioning of your prefrontal cortex from functioning at its highest level. It stops the input. I can't hear you. That's why noise becomes annoying when you're in fight, flight, or freeze. That's why the music you were loving a minute ago is now the most annoying sound in the world. So it stops the input. What's the next one? I want to seek relief. So every time you feel out of control, afraid or anxious, angry or depressed, your limbic system is saying, hey, I'm going to make you stop the input. I'm now going to make you seek relief. I'm going to make you look for a way out. Because remember, a negative text, a bus, an argument, all your concern for something in the future because you watched a report, your brain knows very little difference between all of those 4. It can't tell the difference. It doesn't know which one's going to kill it and which one isn't going to kill it. So it says, hey, you're watching negative news. I'm going to act like we might get killed right here. I'm going to stop the input, meaning I'm going to dumb myself down so low that all you can focus on is what you think the threat is. And guess what? Watching the news is actually not a threat. But every time we do it, our brain is saying, I'm going to dumb everything down. I'm going to drop my IQ down. I'm going to become susceptible to whatever the message is, left, right, or center, upside, downside. I don't care. It's not about politics, right? I'm going to seek relief. I'm going to find a way to get out of this. Guess what increases when you're in fight, flight, or freeze? Prejudice and bias. Prejudice and bias. So when you're in fight, flight, or freeze, one of the first things your brain wants to do is blame somebody. It wants to blame somebody. It wants to make somebody responsible. I just told you how news works, by the way, how news uses your brain chemistry to make sure you stay riveted on their news, right? So it wants to stop the input. It wants to seek relief. And here's the most important thing. If anyone picks up anything, your brain is hardwired to eliminate relationships when it's afraid. Eliminate relationships, right? So it stops the input, it seeks relief, and it eliminates the relationship. See how smart this is? If I was going to get hit by a bus and my brain said, hey, eliminate the relationship to the bus, that would be so smart. That'd be so fantastic that it did that. But let's say I'm a little anxious and feeling out of control in a conversation, or I'm a little angry with someone I really care about, another human being, person I value, that I'm just offering my opinion because somehow they're agreeing or disagreeing with me. And now I feel anxious. Now I feel unheard, all these things. Your limbic system takes over and says, hey, let me see if I can screw up your relationship for you. Bet I can do that right now. Bet it's already done it. It's already done it. So the most important things here is what it's trying to do. Every time your limbic system fires, it's trying to stop the input, seek relief, and eliminate the relationship. That's why this is so important to understand and to work on. Because if you run around with an average brain response, very powerful. One, it means your brain's working like a rock star. If you find yourself anxious or angry or depressed a lot, your brain's working on all 8 cylinders. It's awesome. It is not training your prefrontal cortex, but the brain you have working, rock star level. Super fantastic. That's why I'll take a person who can be extremely negative, and if they're willing to make the change and understand and learn, they actually learn incredibly fast because their brain is already working at rock star level. It's just the negative part. But it already tells me that the positive part will work at a rock star level too, just because I've been doing it with thousands of people. That's all. So what's another word for control? When we feel out of control, what makes us feel out of control? What makes us feel out of control? Type it in the box. I don't care. Anybody type it in the box. What makes us, because there's some new folks in here as well, and so they won't have all the answers. So type it. So what makes us feel out of control? So somebody writes anger. Anger makes you feel out of control. Okay. What else makes us feel out of control? Anger is a response to feeling out of control, and it starts a loop. So somebody writes the unknown. Somebody who hasn't heard this a bunch writes the unknown, right? So fear of the unknown and anxiety. So some folks wrote, what makes us feel out of control? Fear and anxiety. And it does. They actually continue the loop. They send us back up here. First, we had to feel out of control. And then we felt fear. Another word for fear, give it to you, is anxiety. Sorry, it's been a long day, which means I know it's been a long day because I will drop letters out of words that I actually thought I spelled until I saw them. So another word for fear is anxiety. So anytime I feel anxiety, just know somehow I'm feeling out of control. Does that sound better? Does that sound more positive, able to work with? I'm feeling so anxious, nothing I can do with this word. But if I'm feeling anxious, that must mean I'm feeling out of control, where there's something I can do with this. You see how the path works? You start to think, I see Jay Brooks. Thanks, Jay. You see this pathway working and you say, I just feel so anxious. Well, good. I appreciate that. You expressed yourself very well. What do I do now? Remember, this is like SEAL team leadership and first responder and executive and your personal leadership. Just knowing how I feel, that's fantastic and necessary. Then where do I go? And what Jay just did, he went up. Said, what do I feel out of control of? Because I can work with that. I can work with what? First I answered how I feel. Now I went to what. So here's what makes us feel out of control. Here's what activates your limbic system. Change and uncertainty. Change. uncertainty. So what makes your brain and limbic system activate is change and uncertainty. Guess how often you experience change? Now. Constantly. You're constantly, this is why your limbic system is trying to fire, starting to fire, or is firing so many thousands of times a day. Do you know how much change and uncertainty you just experienced right now in those sentences? For those of you who signed on to this room, some of you are here for the first time. That is change and uncertainty. Some of you are here for the 50th time. That's less change and uncertainty, but you still had to do something. So every time you walk out your front door, your limbic system is starting to say, are we ready? Are we ready? We're walking out the door. Are we ready? When you wake up in the morning, anybody wake up in the morning and you'll start to consider something you haven't finished, or you'll start to think, oh my gosh, I have so much to do today. That's your limbic system firing, saying, hey, get ready. Might be a saber-toothed tiger when I take my feet out of this bed. I'm conscious and I do this. This is why we talk about in probably the next class or the class after, the first 90 minutes of your day. Because remember, we are hardwired over here. We are hardwired to be negative. We are hardwired to move towards average. But you're writing software all day, every day. You're writing software all day, every day. So any change and uncertainty is going to put you at number one, control. Your brain right at that moment is trying to make a decision. It wants to make a decision. I have change and uncertainty. Can I minimize the change and get certain? It's constantly looking for certainty. That's where opinions come from. That's where arguments come from. Because if you're not looking for certainty and someone doesn't have the same opinion as you, you might say, that's really interesting. Nothing about my limbic system fired. Because you said your view, and I said, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. So any change and uncertainty is firing your limbic system, any change. So you know you're going to be doing this thousands of times a day. And you know it's taking away your leadership. I'm going to show you a video in a minute. And for those TikTok folks, they're going to hear it, but not see it. So change and uncertainty. Then we go down to fear and anxiety. Let me give you another word. So now we get to anger. I love anger. Anger is the best because anger masks itself in other words like frustration. Anger masks itself in words like, I'm just irritable. Remember, your limbic system has to have a very small, tight loop of behavior because it's saving you from getting hit by the bus. If it had 10 steps, imagine how long it would take. It only has a few steps. Control fear, boom. Get angry. Use that aggression to get away from the bus. Get depressed. Throw up your hands in the argument. Terminate the relationship that way. Remember, it's negative, but it's not bad. You need it. You need to get out of the way of the bus. But what we need to do even more is learn how to get off this board at level 1 and 2. Get off this board at level 1 and 2 because we're devolving. So anger, other words for anger, nice one, frustration. Frustration and irritation. People say this a lot, I'm not really angry, I'm just frustrated. That's the same thing. I'm just frustrated. I'm not really angry, I'm just frustrated. So here's the keys to the kingdom. Every time somebody gets angry, every time I get angry, and believe me, all this talking about this only makes me on the left board for less time. Doesn't take me off the left board. You need your left board. At this point in our brain's evolution, at this point in human evolution, irritation, frustration, depressing your chemistry is super important for life and growth. Your prefrontal cortex is not going to activate the same way unless we bounce through change and uncertainty. So anger, frustration, and irritation, pretty incredible words. Anytime you're angry or frustrated or irritated, we are experiencing fear of feeling out of control about something, not being out of control, but feeling out of control. You weren't in control before the car started to swerve in there. You just weren't perceiving threat. You weren't in control. Your car's hurtling down the road at 60. If you're Stephanie, probably 95 miles an hour. You know, your car's hurtling down the road. You are not in control. Your perception is that you are. So your perception is not allowing you. Remember, science researchers cannot find any one thing that makes you anxious. Not spiders, not snakes, not Freddy Krueger movies, not roller coasters. Anything that makes you anxious is how you perceive it. That's why one person is thrilled and excited while another person is terrified in the same environment. It is your perception. It is your perception that dictates how far we go down this road. And the more we perceive on the left board, the stronger the left board gets, becomes much harder to choose another path. And this whole course about creating the culture of you, bringing out your best character traits, first you have to know why it's so challenging. Because we are designed to be on the left board. So the pathway of negative emotions is control, fear, anger, depression, any change in uncertainty, let our brain say, we might be out of control, get ready. Let's be prepared for fight, flight, or freeze, because it could go so wrong. I'm walking into the first day of school, it could go so wrong. I'm walking, there's a bunch of strangers, they all look when I come in the room. My brain says this could go so wrong. And I start to feel that anxiety that we go, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not bad, just negative chemistry, meaning it's not building you up, it's breaking you down. It's not building you up, it's breaking you down. So the last thing is depression. We start to feel depressed. Now, for those of you who are just watching this the first time, depression is not this psychological thing. You might have run a marathon and you just don't have positive chemistry. You don't even have negative chemistry. It would be hard to get angry, right? You're just depressed. Your chemistry is depressed. So this might come with thoughts. It might come with acceptance, like I just ran a marathon. Or you might feel depressed chemistry because you said, yeah, I just had a huge blowout of an argument. Psst, man, I'm wasted. I can't believe how many IQ points I dropped. I can't believe how out of control I felt. That's depression that you kind of go, yeah, that's exactly why I feel that way. So don't have the connotation with depression that you're broken or all these things. Depression is anxiety, anger, and depression is a naturally occurring response to your limbic system firing repeatedly and getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So now it's more likely to fire. Why? Because a really intelligent brain who's constantly experiencing negative chemistry, a smart brain would say, hey, we better stick on this board as often as we can because it might get negative again really soon. I don't want to keep getting happy, happy, joy, joy, and then getting pounded over here on the left board. Your brain's too smart for that. So if you find yourself anxious a lot, or you find yourself angry a lot, or you find yourself bummed out and burned out a lot, your brain is actually saying, hey, we have gotten so many signals to be on this board. It's a tremendous amount of work. So let's just do what we're hardwired to do. Let's stay anxious. Let's keep our feelings of out of control. And in fact, let's make up some new ones. Let's perceive some new reasons that we're out of control. That's why I spend so much time on the left board when we first start talking about it. When you understand the left board and you catch yourself on it, you get to turn around and say, oh my gosh, I'm doing exactly as my brain was designed to do. This is not a mystery. I'm doing exactly as my brain was designed to do. Life, genetics, DNA, passed down. I don't care where it comes from. Your brain's working. If you find yourself anxious a lot or frustrated or irritated or bummed out a lot, your brain is like supercharged 8-cylinder motor. It's just supercharged and running on negative fuel. It's running on a really poor fuel-air mixture, all of those things. But your brain's rock star level. And one of the reasons I love giving the left board conversation is because when you realize how often you're over here, you're like, man, my brain works awesome. Awesome. Last week, we had an EMS person, medical first responder, 36 years as a first responder. One of the things he told me, he said, I'm 36 years into this. It's piling up. I didn't think it would, but it's caught up to me. It's piling up. What he's simply saying is no matter how positive and motivated he's been in his life, he has been firing this left board for 36 years voluntarily. He has voluntarily been going to a job for 36 years that put him all through change and uncertainty, even though he's trained for it every time as a new person, a new human being that he's trying to help. Even if it turns out it's not an emergency, he's spun up his limbic system. And then he said, oh, it's not an emergency. It's just that elderly person who calls us every Friday night because they're lonely. they're lonely or do whatever. Doesn't matter. 36 years of training at what I call the negative gym. He's doing negative gym reps every single shift. And so we'll talk in the next few weeks what actually happens to him. But so the last thing is depression. I will mention the other types of essions, what I call the essions, but it's depression, repression, oppression, suppression. Depression, repression, oppression, suppression, right? Those are all the essions, and we'll go into those later on. We'll go into the fact, because some of those we create ourselves. Some of those, even oppression, we can oppress ourselves because we don't recognize we're in this loop. We can be oppressed by external things. But remember, being here is a natural consequence. I do a lot of work with veterans, and what people call suicide, I tend to call it self-harm, because that word in and of itself is so ambiguous that it makes your brain think of it. It's not specific enough to work your way out of it. It's like saying, I'm so anxious. Your brain doesn't know what to do with that word. I'm so anxious. But if I wonder what I'm feeling out of control of, now we're talking. Now we're activating simply by asking the question. I wonder what I'm feeling out of control of. Now we're talking. Now we're activating our prefrontal cortex. So let me play a video from Dr. Paul Jenkins. For those of you on TikTok, Dr. Paul Jenkins is an amazing therapist. I don't know him personally. He puts out, of all these YouTube videos, his YouTube channel is called Live on Purpose TV. I love using his videos. He is a rock star. Watch his parenting videos and think about them with yourselves. Think about them with how you work, not how with kids work, because we all work like little kids. We just have more options, and little kids don't. So I'm going to play a video. I hope the TikTok folks can hear it, and then I'll get back to you.
So I'm touting positivity all the time. I'm the positivity shrink. Today, we're going to figure out what negative thinking does to your brain. We have a choice, after all, positive or negative. Where's our thinking? In the first video that I released, when we started doing daily content at Live on Purpose TV, I talked about how to stay positive no matter what. You might remember from that video, that you can link to right up here, that there are two processes in our brain. I've got a little card here that brings the graphic back into perspective. There's evaluation and creation that our mind is constantly doing. As we evaluate our current situation or what it is, we generate either a positive or a negative kind of an emotion or feeling. That emotion or feeling sets us up for what we're going to do up here in creation mode, where we move forward and create what is to be. Review the video and you'll get a good sense of what the model is all about. Here's why I've referred back to that. What we do in our own thinking as we evaluate our life. So here's the short version. Is my life good or is my life bad? Now that's oversimplified. Nobody really thinks in those terms, or do we sometimes? Either way, it's going to create some kind of a feeling. The reason for this has to do with chemistry. Pure and simple. It's brain chemistry. My buddy Scott Halford, who is an amazing speaker and trainer, and who wrote this book, Activate Your Brain. Scott drilled it down to two basic chemicals that symbolize what it is that's going on in our brain. Now, there's more than two, okay? And he acknowledges that too. But if you'll just think of these two, it'll help you to remember it. Negative thinking triggers a little bump of cortisol into your central nervous system and your bloodstream. Now, cortisol is a stress chemical. Cortisol is what is released to help prepare your body for the fight or flight response. And then there's other things too, like adrenaline and other chemicals that contribute. But cortisol gets triggered by our thoughts. What does negative thinking have to do? With our brain health, well, everything. Because if we're triggering cortisol into our central nervous system, we're going to have a very different experience than if we trigger a different chemical. Cortisol has the effect of shutting down some of the higher cognitive parts of our brain, like our prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of thinking, logic, problem solving. Also, some cool things like empathy, compassion, forgiveness, shuts her down. It's not even available to us. We are deactivating that part of our brain. Why? Because we got to redirect our resources down to a more primitive part of our brain that we might call the survival brain, the limbic system, the fight or flight part of our brain, that basically just empowers us to do one of those two things, either put up our dukes and fight or get the heck out of there because we're not safe. All right, so notice that you can trigger those chemicals by your thoughts. That's pretty important. What if we were to think something positive about our life? So I gave you the extreme example of my life is bad, cortisol, fight or flight, or my life is good. Oh, that feels different. Why does it feel different? Chemistry. Going back to the brain, Scott pointed out, when you think in those terms, you get a little bump of dopamine. Now, dopamine is a totally different chemical. It tends to give you feelings of peace and contentment and good feelings, right? Pleasant feelings. But it also has an effect on your brain. And the effect is that it redirects the blood flow from those lower primitive areas of your brain up to the prefrontal or higher cortical areas of your brain. The dopamine that we're talking about now is a completely different chemical from cortisol. It has a completely different effect. In addition to all those pleasant feelings that it gives you, it also activates the higher cortical areas of your brain, allowing you to do some of those really awesome things like problem solving and conflict resolution and compassion and empathy and all of that great stuff that you need the higher parts of your brain to accomplish. You can trigger and activate that by your thoughts. This is so powerful.
Oh, man.
So I'm touting, I don't even like this. In fact, just do this. I'm right on schedule. You know what? It's a totally different feeling, isn't it?
Sorry about
that.
Do
you know? No, you don't. We already established that. But what if you were to take that position? I'm right on schedule. And notice how that feels. How would it feel if you really believed it? Okay. Yeah. See, now we have just activated the brain with a whole different chemical. It's not like it solves anything. What it does is it puts you in position to solve anything. Do your thoughts matter? Oh, yeah. And you get to choose what they are. Negative thinking has a very different effect on your brain chemistry than positive thinking does. Notice that. Experiment with it. Have some fun with it, and let's see if we can activate our brain to work for us instead of against us. Big shout.
All right. Sorry, there's a little glitch in the thing there. No matter how many times I do this, it's still anything can happen. It used to put me, there's a good example. It used to put me very on the left board. I'd watch a little glitch, but now it's happened enough times, but it has not happened like 1,000 times. So I've learned to accept and just kind of adjust. So do you hear what Dr. Paul said? What I love about Dr. Paul's videos is he just spells it out to how it works. First of all, dopamine. When your limbic system fires, you have a big burst of adrenaline and cortisol. Because remember, your brain is saying, hey, I got to save you from getting killed right here. It might be someone just simply disagreeing with you. And your brain is saying, oh, they're disagreeing with me. They're telling me I'm wrong. I might get killed here. That's how much your brain actually responds to things. So let's go back to the left board a minute. And we're going to jump to the right. So we know what we've been talking about is your brain is hardwired. It is hardwired to be average. It is hardwired to be negative. unless you do something about it. And it's hardwired to be average or negative because that's safe for a while. When you're young, when you're a child, and even up to the age of 25 or 26, your prefrontal cortex is still developing all the way up to 25, 26 years old, give or take. So when you're really young, you don't even have the ability to make good decisions, right? I still don't, but some of you do. But you don't even have the ability to make good decisions. So of course, your brain's saying, hey, get super judgmental. Decide whether there's a really great reward or whether we should fight, flight, or freeze. Those are its only necessities. Great reward, run away, fight, freeze. And when you're young, it's hard to fight, even though we might think we can. When you're 5 or 6, it's very hard to fight the world. So we end up doing these things. So your brain, from a very early age, is doing reps at the negative gym because that's what saves it. But once you recognize, oh, well, now I'm 15, now I'm 18, now I'm 20, now I'm 25, now I'm 30. Those tools of fight, flight, or freeze don't work anymore. Why? Because eliminating the relationship to anything that annoys me, well, now things that annoy me are 7 billion people wide. They're people at work. I need that job. They're relationships that I'd like to have. I can't, it's not like I'm 5 and I can tell my mom I hate her. And it's just not going to go anywhere. That's not the rules anymore. So all of a sudden, our limbic system being so in charge and so dominant, what was saving us now is now hurting us. Now it's eliminating relationships to relationships that aren't as forgiving. So you're going to find all of the anxiety we talk about, all of the depressions we talk about, all of the social angst we talk about. It's all here on the left board because it's all the limbic system. It's all the limbic system. So let me give you a couple of things to think about. Your limbic system, your left board is asking the question every time it fires. Every time you experience any change and uncertainty, like we did with the video, like you did coming into this class, like you will every time someone says good morning, every time someone says hello, how are you? Your brain is processing and it's asking a question. And the question is, hey, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? And the more stressed out we get and the more anxious, the louder the voice gets. Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? It's just asking. It never answers the question because the part of you that answers that question has had the resources drawn out of it. Your prefrontal cortex answers that question. Your limbic system plays this really neat trick. It keeps asking, but it's incapable of answering, am I safe? Am I safe? As long as it's running down this path, it's going to keep this. Have you ever had a really horrible day or an argument, and then we do what's called catastrophizing? We turn around and we say, oh, I had the worst meeting. Oh my gosh, my reviews are going to be bad. I should be so much more. I'm so dumb. This is why I get passed up for things. That's your limbic system saying, hey, I can't figure out why I'm feeling this way. Let's make stuff up. Let's make some stuff up. Let's exaggerate. Let's exaggerate. Have you ever been in a conversation or an argument and you say, you know what? You always do this. You never do this. I'm never going to be able to accomplish this. That's your limbic system. That's your limbic system. Your adrenaline, your cortisol have come up so much. Your prefrontal cortex has had the resources sucked out of it. The right board is depleted. We cannot activate confidence, acceptance of facts. We cannot activate empathy. We cannot activate our higher levels of IQ. We essentially, our IQ drops down. And so now the dumbest part of us, the least educated part of us is asking, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? I have a hard time answering that question on a good day, let alone answering it if I'm upset. So you'll hear yourself say things like, that's right, or that's wrong. Remember, there's nothing wrong or right with those words. It's a sign that your brain is dealing with change and uncertainty. Oh, that's right. That's right. Here's what happens. As soon as I say, oh, that's right, we are not evolving the conversation anymore until I get off of level 1. So when I say that's right, it might be right. We might have the accepted thing of 2 + 2 is 4. That's right. But until I get off of right and wrong, we are not going to evolve the conversation. So whenever you say in your head, that's right, or no, I disagree, or that's wrong, or I agree, just know this is you dealing with level 1, change and uncertainty. Somebody throws 2 numbers out. 5 and 5 and says it's 10, and your brain goes, oh, 5 and 5, holy cow, got to do some math. I'm like, I'm old, got to do some math. And it says, oh, that's right. It's just your brain dealing with change and uncertainty. So knowing that we're over here, we now have to activate the prefrontal cortex. We have to evolve the situation. So you'll hear these words, that's right, or right, wrong, good, bad, agree or disagree. These are all signs that we are at level 1. Remember, we need level 1. Every time we have change and uncertainty, we go to level 1. So I'm not saying don't go to level 1. I'm not saying you wouldn't or couldn't. You can't even stop level 1. What I'm suggesting is recognize where you are. I'm at level 1. What I do after this is what is going to tell me. What I do after this is what's going to tell me, what I do after this is what's going to tell me how I activate my prefrontal cortex. So if someone says to me, here's my opinion, if I feel myself go into 1 and 2, what do? I choose a sentence that is going to activate my prefrontal cortex. I choose a sentence. Here's what we call it. We call it do one thing. I know, I just realized I'm saying in my head, I'm like, that's right. I'm even nodding. That's right. I know that I've started to shut down my listening ability as I start to agree. Remember, this is the beginning of tunnel hearing, tunnel vision, and tunnel thinking. So I say, that's right, because what I'm really doing is saying, my head just went to work on change and uncertainty, and I needed to be certain. So I said, yes, 5 and 5 is 10. And it might be right. Just know where you're at. So we do one thing. Remember, it's asking the question, am I safe? The same thing that said 5 and 5 is 10 will take something. Remember, our acceptance of facts is down. Our brain cannot manipulate facts easily. It can't access memory. It can't do basic math. It can't work out the logic that we have on the right board. So we also will look for an answer, even if it's not true. We will look for an answer. You will never do this. You will always do this. That's right. The sky is falling. Oh, that's right. The sky's never going to fall. We will make up facts. We will make up facts. We will exaggerate. So think about that. Every time we think in right, wrong, good, bad, agree, or disagree, just know you're at level 1. Just know you're at level 1. Know that you need to now do one thing to activate your prefrontal cortex. When I was up in Berkeley, working with some folks in the UC Berkeley community, I was running a program up there. Very, very politically challenging time for folks. Berkeley's very, very politically polarized, and I'm not. So it was a very interesting time for me to work on brain chemistry. So people would come up and they would start in saying, hey, did you hear what that person said? Or did you hear what that person said? And I would hear them way down into anxiety and anger, way down, control, feeling out of control about their politics, even if they agreed. Because agreeing about something you feel negative about is also driving you down the left board. So my one thing I did was I would just say every single time, no, I haven't heard it all. That sounds interesting. Because what I did was I activated my prefrontal cortex. I did not meet them in agreement or disagreement, in anxiety. I would feel their anxiety coming in. I would hear it in their conversation. And I would say, no, I haven't heard. I don't even watch the news. That's so interesting. Or tell me that sounds interesting. Or no, I haven't heard at all. If you didn't think, remember, I don't ever lie. Don't ever lie about that. It's going to put you on the left board. So use a statement that works for you. Someone can, did you hear what so-and-so said? I don't even watch the news. I haven't heard at all. And then they can continue on. What I haven't done is I haven't encouraged them to stay on this board. I haven't pushed against them. I haven't agreed or disagreed. Now, let's say they said something and I had never heard it like that before. It is completely contrary to how I have thought of things before. Did you hear how I phrased that? It's completely contrary to how I've thought of things before for me, because I'm not saying they're wrong. So then I would be able to turn around and say, you know, that's so interesting. I haven't thought of it that way before, because I'm activating in doing so my prefrontal cortex. I'm listening to them and I'm phrasing it a way that takes the energy of their control, fear, anger, because I'm feeling it too, right? It infects the room. We infect the room with however we are. And so I say, oh, I've never thought of it that way before, because I don't want to be right or wrong. I want to understand them. I don't want to eliminate the relationship. I want to develop it. Now, if somebody was going to stab me, I would not want to develop that relationship. That is what your fight, flight, or freeze response is for. But somebody's anger or upset or depression about their views is not stabbing me. And when you feel like it's stabbing you and you're like, oh, I'm so offended, I'm so hurt, I'm so angry, I'm so irritated, that's so depressing, turn around and say, that's so interesting. Tell me more. You might say, wow, you seem really passionate about that. Once again, for me to recognize their passion, I have activated my prefrontal cortex. My IQ goes up. Guess what? My immune system goes up, just like that. My strength goes up. My breathing rate comes down. You're the best leader when you recognize you're on the left board, control, fear, anger, depression, and we do one thing. Because here's the trick about the right board, your prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is not asking, am I safe? It is not saying I am safe. When people say I don't feel safe, it's not in response to feeling safe in other places. Your prefrontal cortex stops asking, because your prefrontal cortex didn't need to be right. It needed to evolve. The relationship, the conversation, the math, the science. I am 56 years old as of in 4 days. I have watched math, science, planets that were planets are not called planets anymore. I have watched almost everything change. The food pyramid, who thought that could change? Cigarettes, 10 years before I was born, were designed to be healthy. It was supposed to be super healthy for you, right? That's how much has changed. So I have almost lost the idea of right and wrong because I've watched everything evolve and some things devolve. So right, wrong, good, bad, agree and disagree. Just know, as soon as I say, I don't agree with that. On TikTok, I always hear people say, that is the worst advice ever. I don't agree. I end up joining them a lot of times on the left board. And I'm like, oh, just stop. Just stop. They're on the left board. They're not bringing their smartest self here. Or they would have said, I've always thought of it this way. It's funny, I've always looked at it this way. Funny, I found this to be motivating more than that. Or interesting, I find that to be very, very useful for myself, that tool that I recommended not doing. You see what they did? They actually didn't say right, wrong, good, bad, agree, or disagree. They actually said, interesting. You see it that way. I see it this way. They're not actually saying I'm wrong, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I posted a post the other day that was about, and you all saw it because a lot of you are in the Navy SEAL candidate program. When you're in the surf zone locking arms, I said, resist the urge to yell and scream at each other. Resist the urge to have to cheerlead and motivate. The comments I got in that, if I was going to get stuck on a left board, which I did sometimes, would melt you down. Because most people think about how they're right. Most people deal with motivating each other and cheerleading in sporting environments, in encouraging, in parent-child environments, in mentor. We're talking about warriors on the field who are busy being at war. So they cannot motivate each other. You do not have the bandwidth. It's not your job to cheerlead the person next to you, except by demonstrations of your right board excellence, even when the world of war is pushing you on the left board. But most of the comments, if you think about, that's so interesting how they think of this, then your brain lights up and you realize why. Because in sports, and when they needed encouragement, that was it. Because in a mentor-student relationship, there's plenty of time for encouragement and cheerleading, and our brains need that. In a warrior environment, I see Jay Brooks in a warrior environment, Jay Brooks cannot stop to say, hey, coach, come on, just a couple more steps. Just do it. Because then Jay Brooks and I are not on point. Jay Brooks and I are not functional as warriors anymore. But if he was coaching me on my math skills, come on, you can do it. Perfect. Perfect, because that is his job then. So if you come off of right and wrong, good and bad, agree and disagree, your brain starts to understand why people have the opinion they do. And here's the best part. Every time you go to level 1 and 2, control fear, control little anxiety, they almost always come together. They do come together, and this might not be perceptible. Every time you go from 1 to 2 and back to the right board, you gain confidence. Confidence. All confidence is experiencing change and uncertainty of any kind. and the anxiety that comes from that, and asking a question or making a comment or contemplating something that activates your prefrontal cortex. That's confidence. Confidence is literally you experiencing change and uncertainty and living and making a positive action. So every time someone comes up and says, and you want to go, oh, I totally disagree, I feel at risk. If you turn around and say, oh, wait, I'm right here. This is what Coach Mac was talking about. I'm right here. I'm at control fear. And now I'm even angry. I'm irritated. I totally disagree. That's such bad advice. If you turn around and say, oh, wait a minute, I know where I am. I'm level 1, 2, and 3. I'm minimized. I'm now eliminating a relationship to my prefrontal cortex. I am strengthening my anxiety. I am strengthening my left board. And all I have to do to gain confidence is navigate to the right. All I have to do is say, you know, I hadn't thought of it that way. I certainly don't see myself the way you're viewing me or you're expressing viewing me. You see what I did? I took my anxiety that I was feeling on this board and I activated my prefrontal cortex by moving past the right, wrong, good, bad, agree or disagree. These responses are meant to stop your brain from experiencing change and uncertainty. They're helpful, but we have to move on. We have to evolve the relationship. So think about it today. Try it. We got 14 minutes left. Try it. Right, wrong, good, bad, agree or disagree. That's the do one thing. Find a phrase or two that works for you. Because I'll bet most of the places you would agree, disagree, good, bad, right, wrong, are with the same people or a lot of the same people. So I promise you're going to have opportunity to practice this, right? Because there's going to be people that what we call, they're pushing your buttons. What they're really doing is making you feel out of control and afraid. Only they're not making you. Your relationship with them, your perception of it, is that you have to work with it in fight, flight, or freeze. Fight, flight, or freeze. Here's the problem with it. The more I'm on the left board, the less I can leave the room. The more I'm on the left board, the less I can make a good decision, right? Because my IQ came down. Abraham Maslow, his work tells us your acceptance of facts comes down, which means if I keep you on the left board, I can make you believe stuff that is so far from factual. If I keep you on the left board and then keep feeding you information, I can make you believe almost anything because your IQ drops up to 30 points over here. Your acceptance of facts goes away. Your ability to work, when next time you're getting run over by a bus, try to do some simple math. Try to change the radio station, anything. Not going to be able to do it. Not going to be able to do it because it all comes down. This board is so important. Recognize when you're on it. And these are my cues. Recognize when you are right, wrong, or someone else's, good, bad, meaning, oh, they're so much better than me. So much better than me. I love when people are better than me at stuff. Everyone's better than me at something, right? And maybe a lot of things. Everyone, I actually look for it. I actually look, because here's another way to activate your prefrontal cortex. Look where people are awesome. Look where people are awesome. So what we have here on the board is do one thing. So what do you do? What do you do? Now we've got this all. We've got this left board. We have all these cues for being on the left board. What do we do? What do we do? Let me give you a couple things. The first thing is find something you like about everyone. Find something you like about everyone. Find something you like about everyone. This is like a suit of armor. It's not impenetrable, but this phrase is like a suit of armor. Find something you like about everyone. Why? Because if I'm on the left board, remember, if I'm walking into this room, and every time I do this, I want it to go well. I hope people have value, right? I care what people think. I surround myself with great people. So caring how they feel and whether what I can offer adds benefit to them, it's very important to me. So when people say, I don't care what people think, they're typically, it's a chance they might not be, but they're typically speaking from the left board saying, I don't care what those crappy people think. Well, I'm surrounded by awesome people. And I make sure that awesome people there, awesome people here. I'm surrounded by amazing people. So I do care what you think. I actually want to hear what you think. Now, I'd prefer not to hear it stabbing me in the face from your left board. You know, my those emotional ice picks, but that's where people are trained to be. So all the negative comments on the internet, you're just realizing that those people, the way they phrased it, are they're feeling so out of control and afraid and angry. And depending on your hormone profile, you might be coexisting anger and depression. Some people show depression with anger. Some people show depression by a lack of visible anger. So don't think that depressing chemistry means you're not angry, because some people's hormone profile just leaves them up here. Higher testosterone levels will tend to mix those two. So think about it. Find something you like about everyone. So when I walk in the room, I saw Jay's son, and I saw Hunter, and I think it was it your wife's photo up there, Hunter? Was it someone else's photo when you signed in?
It was my sister's.
Sister. So I saw his sister's photo and I thought, oh, that's kind of cute. Hunter's got his sister's photo up there as his screensaver. See, I'm finding something I like, because I'm walking into change and uncertainty. I'm walking into a room where my limbic system is trying to say, hey, do you feel out of control? Of course I do. I'm trying to put on a class. I'm trying to put on something that's a little different every time. This doesn't come out of a can, right? It's a little different, for better or for worse. So that can bring me down to feeling a little anxious. So how do I deal with that? I activate my prefrontal cortex by finding someone I like about everyone. So Mr. Hunter comes in, I thought, oh, great photo. Kind of funny. And then I see people I know. I see Mark come in. I see Carl register again. I saw Carl register today. Remember, it doesn't have to be amazing. The fact that I'm noticing things that I find positive, it's my perception. Because remember, I'm not going to perceive everything on the left board and perceive everything on the right board. Those are not coexisting chemistries. My prefrontal cortex got drained of resources as my adrenaline and cortisol came up. So by noticing what I like about somebody, I'm pushing resources back to my prefrontal cortex. I'm literally stealing from the strength of my negative board. And guess what? I'm developing confidence. You are in charge of your confidence level. You do not need to be best. You do not need to win a race. You do not need to be the strongest. Your confidence level is 100% about going level 1, 2, right board, 1, 2, right board, 1, 2, 3, 1 to 3, right board, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 to 4, right board. And we'll talk about it in the next couple of weeks. As we get off this left board, we're going to talk about what to do. But the first one is find something you like about everyone. Find something you like about everyone. What's another one? What's another one we have? I'll give you another big one. Timing. The single greatest left board activator that you will have in your life is even thinking about being late. Even thinking about it. I know a bunch of people who watch this right now going, oh my God, I'm so screwed. My negative Jim is going to be the strong. It's going to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger strong. Be on time. Be on time. I won't tell that big story today, maybe next week, because a lot of folks have heard it lately. But the bottom line is your confidence level is about bringing yourself back to 1 and 2. Nothing drives you down the left board except drugs, alcohol, and actually physically hurting yourself. Nothing drives yourself down the left board like drugs, alcohol, or physically hurting yourself like not managing your time. If I wanted to minimize most people's anxiety, most people I meet, and maximize their positive chemistry, I would simply help them organize their calendar and follow through. Would simply help them organize their calendar and follow through. Why? Because as soon as I even start to think I'm late, if your brain says, oh my gosh, I should go to bed, but I'm still playing Call of Duty. Oh my gosh, I'm still watching episodes of Yellowstone. And believe me, I've done not Call of Duty for years since my son was younger, but I've done both of those, stayed up way too late. As soon as you start thinking I should have, or I should, or you start realizing you didn't and you should have, you are going into control fear, 100%. Just in your head. You're not even late yet, but you are now running down this path because you're perceiving that you didn't follow through with things. The greatest thing that erodes your self-confidence, steals from your positive chemistry, is simply being late, not following through. So first thing in the morning, tomorrow, here's your day. I invite you to create the culture of you. Create the culture of you. Tomorrow morning, first thing, do one thing. Think about it right now. Anyone who's watching, think, when I first wake up tomorrow, what is the one thing that I would really like to follow through with? Is it put my feet on the floor? Is it within 5 minutes, put my feet on the floor because I hit the alarm? Is it that I hit the snooze button? For those of you who are snooze buttons, if you're hitting the snooze button and you ever think, oh my gosh, I got to get up, you are now writing software to support your hardware, to support your hardwired software. You are now writing your own software that could have been positive. We're writing it to negative. Okay, so somebody writes, get up and make coffee for my family. So Jordan, do you do that every day? Is that something you do every day? Do you make that happen every day, or are there days, is it hard to do? Nice and simple. The thing I love doing is getting up and making coffee for my family, this person said. So do you do that every day? You do it every day, right? So that's actually a confidence builder for Jordan. But guess what? If Jordan does this every day, gets up, makes coffee, it starts to be less of a confidence builder. Now it's a confidence maintainer, right? So it's wonderful. Jordan says, I like to do this. I feel good. It benefits other people. By the way, that's like chemistry trifecta. That's your serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin. I followed through with something. I took care of things. I honored my word, and it benefited other people. Serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin. Trifecta. Your brain goes crazy when you follow through with something that benefits others. So the first thing to do tomorrow, pick something. In your heads tonight, pick something and say, now for Jordan does this every day. So Jordan now has to say, I'm going to add something else to the thing. Jordan might already do something else too. But if Jordan now notices the second thing, she does a confidence building rep at the positive gym. Like the fact that I just asked Jordan and said, do you do this every day? And Jordan said, yes, I do it every day. That added confidence to Jordan's center of doing it every day. She just noticed it, called it out, and we confirmed it. So add something new. First thing, for some people, you might agonize about getting out of bed. You are literally saying, I want to promote control, fear, anger, and depression all day. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not good or bad, right or wrong. That's just what's happening. So if you run around and you feel like you're anxious, you feel like you're depressed, you feel like you're angry a lot, the first thing you follow through with in the day, make them small things. Follow through with small tasks. Why this is so important. So first thing in the day, follow through with small tasks. Jordan gets up and makes coffee. I'm going to tell you a couple of things. One of them should be hygiene related. Brush your teeth. Some people, if they're working at home, they'd be like, oh, I might have waited hours. There is so much positive chemistry. And remember, when you get up in the morning, your brain is as cleaned out as it's going to be. It's as ready for software writing as it's going to be first thing in the morning, because you haven't pulled in news. You haven't pulled in negativity. Your thoughts are as pure as they're going to be. If you follow through with small tasks, first thing in the morning, you are going to start writing serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin software. You're going to start writing positive chemistry into your day. Remember, and here's the thing I'm going to leave you with in our last few minutes. Every time you fire your limbic system, every time you go into fight, flight, or freeze, this is going to last a minimum of 20 to 90 minutes. You are going to be at minimized capacity for 20 to 90 minutes. So every time you don't follow through with what you said you were, you had to get yelled at or yell at yourself to take out the trash. You have now moved yourself into control, fear, anger, irritation, or frustration, or maybe depression for a minimum of 20 to 90 minutes. It's like spilling water on the floor. The water has to evaporate. And even if you wipe it up with a towel and kind of mask it and pretend it's not there, now it's in the towel. Still got to evaporate. So that's what happens with negative chemistry every time. Guess how long it is in positive chemistry? So we come over here to positive chemistry. How long does that last? 2 to 5 seconds. How's that for robbery? How's that for brain chemistry robbery? So over here, when we do something negative, 20 to 90 minutes it's going to last. We go over here, we follow through with small tasks. This is why Jordan has to add things to add more confidence, because Jordan makes that coffee for the family every day. She's firming up, she's strengthening the chemistry that she's built there, but she has to go higher. Jordan has to go higher. So Jordan has to add new things to follow through. New things to follow through. Remember, there is no end to what your positive chemistry can do. There is an end to control, fear, anger, depression. Stop the input, seek relief, and eliminate the relationships. There's a very definite end to that. So, all right, it's 15 after, and integrity is starting and ending a meeting on time. That is one of the big things of integrity, because that's the other thing that puts you on the left board, is when someone doesn't follow through with their meeting timelines, a big damaging thing in corporations. So you are awesome, and so are all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Next week, we're going to go to the right board. Next week, we're going to go to the right board and talk about a list of small behaviors that make your prefrontal cortex go crazy. Remember, if you run around anxious, depressed, or feeling out of control, your brain is working like a rock star. We just have to go over the behaviors that make your prefrontal cortex work like a rock star. It will. Everybody's brilliant. I'll show it to you as we go along how brilliant each one is.